Good morning, everybody. Sorry, it's blurry. It'll focus here in a second. It'll eventually focus. So no worries. All right, we got some questions in here. Looks like we just got one so far. WWCA says, in my backswing, how high should the hands be in average swing? And how do I keep my arms from cutting across my chest in the rotation? So basically, typically what I like to see as far as arm height is concerned is basically just above the shoulder plane. I apologize that this is out of focus. It typically at some point kind of auto focuses. So hopefully it will. So I know this is blurry, but it's not the resolution. It's just that it's out of focus. I'll try to get this to kind of refocus here. Usually it just eventually kind of focuses. So I apologize that it's blurry, but hopefully you can still kind of see what's going on here. But basically what I like to see is that the arm basically, so if this is my shoulder plane, right, I like to see my arm a little above that, right? That's typically going to put you in a good position. It doesn't mean that you can't be flatter than that, and it doesn't mean that you can't be higher than that, but that's generally what I like to see. And the reason is that it makes it easier to shallow out the club from there. Right. So if I'm really high with my hands, right. So let's say I'm way up here, then I've got to shallow out the club by kind of making my hands kind of go more back behind me a little bit. And that's a move that I don't see a lot of golfers doing. There are definitely, some golf like Bubba Watson, Justin Thomas, Dustin Johnson, like these, there are players that have really, really high hands and, but I think the most recreational golfers may have a little bit of a hard time from there. So that doesn't, if you have a very high hand swing, if you have a very upright swing and you're getting the club to shallow out, stick with it because there's an advantage to having a very upright swing. And the advantage is that typically you can create more speed from a more upright swing, right? So, but if you don't shallow it from an upright swing, you're kind of negating that speed because you're going to end up coming down steep from there, and then you're going to lose some speed from coming down steep. So, but if you're shallowing it from a upright position, that doesn't mean I think you should go down to a more flatter position because that's what I prefer. It's just what I see most recreational golfers doing is somewhere in this area is typically a good place to be. Now, again, you can be flatter if you want. But the disadvantage to that is that it can be typically more difficult to create speed from there because you don't have as much space to create speed, basically. Now, as far as stopping coming over the top from getting your arms up higher, you have to lower your arms. So if you raise your arms, you got to lower them, right? So in my backswing, I'm basically doing this, right? Well, on the downswing, I need to do this. I need to lower my arms back down, right? So if I bring my arms up to the top and then I keep them up there, well, yeah, I'm just going to come way over the top. So if I bring my arms up here, I want to feel my arms lowering down, right? I want to almost feel like my left arm is kind of going down off on my chest like this. That's what's going to help you to shallow out the club and to keep turning through the ball. So feel those arms lowering down. Now, again, I apologize. This is usually it focuses a little bit quicker than this. I don't know why it's having such a trouble today. Let me try cleaning the lens a little bit. See if that gets it. Maybe the lens is dirty or something. It's not working quite as good. See, if I put my hand there, it looks good, but it's just not focusing. Oh. In the past, it's just kind of eventually did it. So every now and then it does this. So I apologize. All right. So clean my glasses and get my glasses back on so I can read. All right. So David A says, can you talk about the pressure of the right hand on the shaft and the thumb of the left hand throughout the swing? In particular, the pad of the right hand and over the thumb of the left hand. So basically, as far as pressure is concerned, I think people really overcomplicate the pressure, and it seems like you're trying to do that a little bit. You're not. So think about it this way: you're not going to be able to regulate the pressure in your hands the way that you're talking about, right? You're not going to be able to regulate. Okay, I'm going to squeeze it this hard with my pad and this hard with my thumb because the swing is that dynamic motion, right? So the moment the club starts moving, the pressure in the hands is going to change. The pressure that you're putting into the handle is going to change. You're not going to be able to create constant pressure. So I never quite understood when people are like, oh, it's a 2 out of 10 and pressure here. This is a 10 out of 10 at this point in the swing. Because one thing is that what I say is 2 out of 10 may not be the same as what you say is 2 out of 10. And then also it's changing, right? So you can't really, the way I would think about it is you basically want to hold the club as lightly as you can and still be able to control it. That's what you want to be able to do. Hold it as lightly as you can and still be able to control the club. So what that means is that if I'm holding it like this and I'm holding it so lightly that the club is coming out of my hands, up there, refocus. If I'm holding it, so maybe the key was to put a club up in the air. I'll have to remember that for next time. But if I hold the club like this, right, and I hold it as lightly as I can without it coming out of my hands, that's basically how much I want to hold it. And you're going to do that intuitively throughout the swing. And I can prove it to you. Have a buddy hold the club like this, do the same thing. Hold it as lightly as you can without the club falling out of your hands. Then have a buddy come up and pull on it, pull on the club. What's going to happen is you're instinctually going to put more pressure into the handle to keep your friend from pulling the club out. Because if you literally kept the same exact amount of pressure, then your friend would just pull the club out of your hands, right? Because you're holding it as lightly as you can without dropping it, right? So the moment any pressure is added, if you don't increase the pressure, it should come out of your hands, right? But that's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is that you're not going to let your buddy pull it out of your hands. So that's essentially what's happening in the golf swing. When you're swinging this club back, there's a force that's going this way from the club, right? The club head, the momentum of the club head is wanting to pull the club, the grip, out of your hands, and you're going to instinctually add more pressure into your hand to be able to do that, right? So that's really what's going on. You're going to feel the most pressure the farthest away from the club head, right? So most of that pressure is going to be kind of in this area. That's because that's where the pressure, that's where the force is the highest, right? So that's the way you kind of want to think about it. You're not going to be able to think, okay, right hand more pressure here, left hand more pressure. The swing's moving too fast, and in reality, you're just not really doing that. So you can't really think about what you got to do is just hold the club as lightly as you can without losing control of it, without the club coming out of your hands. That's how tightly you want to hold it. So Paul C says, does height play any part in the swing? I am tall and hit every shot thin. I can't seem to get low enough and stay down through the shot. Yeah, it certainly can. I mean, you may be more comfortable with longer clubs. I don't know if you've been fit for your clubs, but if you're tall, generally longer clubs, are going to be easier. If you think about it in an extreme sense, like if you were to hit junior clubs, it'd probably even be more difficult, right? So you're having the same kind of difficulty, but with you may be having the same kind of difficulty, but with shorter clubs. So I would recommend getting fitted, so that way okay, do I have the right club's length for me that works the best for me? You may benefit from having longer clubs. So that's what I would that's what I'd recommend doing. But also keep in mind that could also be not really a part of the problem. A lot of people hit thin shots, and it's not because they're tall or short or whatever. with that mindset, it would be like all tall people thin the ball, but all short people should chunk the ball, right? But that's not really what happens. Short people thin the ball and chunk the ball. Tall people thin the ball and chunk the ball. We all have these issues. So now I will say, if you're taller and you have stock clubs, it may be making it more difficult for you to get the club down to the ball, and that can lead to thin shots, right? But it could also be that your bottom of your swing arc is occurring in the wrong place. So typically, when people struggle with thin shots, it's because the bottom of their swing arc is not in the right place. So where we want the bottom of the swing arc to be, if this is the bottom of the swing arc where the tape is, and I'm hitting this way, I want the bottom of my swing arc to be in front of a few inches and slightly below my ball, right? So that means that my club is coming down, it's making contact with the ball and the ground basically at the same time, and then it gets into the ground. I create a divot. My club bottoms out right in the middle of that divot. Then it finishes the divot and comes out of the ground, right? That's typically that's what we see in the best players in the world. So if you're hitting thin shots, it's because the bottom of this swing is not in the correct place. It could be that maybe you have your bottom of your swing forward enough, but it's just not getting down to the ball, which would make sense. That's probably what you're seeing in your mind, is that, okay, I'm just not getting the club down to the ball, and that's why I'm hitting it thin, right? So it could be that it's like that. In my hand, you can imagine my hand is the ball, my fist is the ball, and that's on the ground, and the club's coming in and hitting the ball thin. It could be that it's just too far forward, right? That could also be what's going on. If you're taking a divot, but it's too far in front of the ball, right? You can see how that would create a thin shot. It could also be that the club's coming down, it's bottoming out before the ball, then it's actually working up into the ball. You're not taking a divot, you're barely missing the ground. Then the club works up into the ball, leading to a thin shot. The most common thin shot, I would say, is where the club basically is bottoming out where the ball is, and you're just kind of picking it off the turf. That's the most common that I would say. So basically what's happening is you're not controlling the bottom of this swing arc, right? So, so yeah, it could be that your clubs being maybe a little too short for you is making that more difficult, but that's essentially what's going on. So taking measures like maybe getting fitted for clubs to see if longer clubs would make it easier to get that club down to the ball. But you may get longer clubs and still hit thin shots because because the bottom of your swing is still not in the right place. So something to think about, if you do happen to get fit for clubs. All right, let's keep going. So WWCA says, when doing the shallow fix program, I'm stuck on getting the 10 in a row drawing curve. I went to the box drill and at first demolished the inside corner of the box, made some progress, but keep kicking the corner. Any particular exaggeration feels I could apply? Well, the next thing, the exaggeration, the next thing would be the wall drill that Clay talks about in there, where basically you stand, I think it's about 2 feet away from a wall. You go up to the top, and then you want to come down in the downswing and feel that club kind of going down the wall. And then by about here, that's when you bring it out to the ball, right? So that would be an exaggeration drill. But one thing I would say is that when you're in the situation that you're in, and let's say you're doing your best to get that, to miss that box, right? To avoid hitting that box. But you're probably going at full speed with a full length swing, and it's just not happening, right? So what you have to do is you have to regress things to where you can do them, get more comfortable with it, then progress it from there. So a regression could be slowing down, right? So taking a swing that would maybe go 50% of the distance. So you take a full swing, but at half the speed. So that can make it a little bit easier for you to accomplish it, because speed takes away feel. So, if you're going really fast, you're going to want to do more what you normally do, what you're comfortable with. So getting to where you're slowing down, then you get to where maybe you can do it at 50% speed, right? And then you get to where you can do it at 75% speed. You get better at that speed, then you progress it from there. You could also do it in a shorter swing, right? Now, the whole goal of this is to regress to progress, right? You regress the swing to where you can do it, then you progress it from there. You get better from that regress state. But that's essentially what you have to do. You have to regress to where you can actually do it, get better at doing it there, then progress it from there. So that's what I would recommend. If you do that exaggeration drill and it still doesn't do the trick, I would slow down. So basically what I'd say is if you're hitting a 150-yard club, then what I would do is I would make a full swing. But if you were to hit the ball, your swing with slow enough speed that it would only go about 75 yards. So it's just a much slower swing. And ideally that's not what we want to have in the long run, but you may need to do that to get comfortable with swinging from the inside, and then you go a little bit faster, get to where you can do it there. So David A says, the reason I asked about the grip pressure is that at times I feel like I'm letting go of the shaft a little with my right hand. Yeah, so you're not holding on to it tightly enough to have control of it, right? So you probably just need to put a little bit more pressure into the handle with your right hand, so that way you can keep control of it. So Chad says, could you give a better visualization of the arm movement from waist high to top of backswing? I tend to get the right elbow stuck behind me. So that's tough because there's no one backswing that everyone needs to do. If you look at any, you can look at 10 tour players and you can see 10 different backswings. So there's no one, there's some players that are like this, right? There's some players that are like this. There's some players that are like this. There's some players that push their hands out a little bit more, right? So there's no one place from, there's no one position. Not, if you look at all tour players, they're not all right here, right? They can have their hands and their club in different place. So I'm not really sure how to answer that question because there isn't any one place. But what I will say is if you're getting your hand stuck behind you, the most common thing that I see is because people are pushing their hands out too much in the beginning of the backswing. So what I mean is they're putting their hands out here. So the hands kind of push out a lot, and then they get up here, and then they don't have any way to create any depth except to kind of fold their arm behind them, right? So basically it would look something like this, right? Where they get up here and they realize if I actually try to hit the ball from here, right, what's going to happen? I'm going to come way over the top, right? And that's going to lead to poor shots, slices, pulls, pull hooks, chopping down into the ball, poor strikes. It's just going to lead typically to issues. So what a lot of people will do is if they get their hands going out too much, what they'll do is they'll get the hands to move in late. And now look what happens. That's kind of getting my elbow to kind of fold back behind me. And now my arm's going to be kind of stuck. So if I had to guess, that's probably what's happening. So what I would try to feel more is more of like a hands in, club out. So more hands in, club out. Feel like your hands are kind of more over your toe line. Hands in, club out. And that's not to say, you can move your hands out here and then move it. There are players that do that, but I'm just talking about a common thing that I see. But hands in, club out a little bit, and then kind of stand the club up, right? Your arms are going to be more like this, where your elbows are going to be more level at this position. And then from there, you just go up, right? And now my arm is more tucked underneath, and now I can make a good downswing from there, right? Whereas if you kind of bring it up and then you keep your right arm kind of like this, where your right arm is basically kind of on top of your left arm, right? Then that's where you're going to get stuck. So go ahead and let that right arm get underneath your left arm as you're bringing it up to the top. So that way, you can make a good downswing from there. All right, keep the questions coming. while you guys are coming up with questions, I'm just going to do some of my other work I have to do. So David A says, how do you recommend students work through the various lessons in the top speed system? If after doing the drills in a section, I don't feel like I've become proficient in that area, should I continue? In other words, how do lessons build on one another? So there's several ways you can kind of work through things. If you're working through the top speed golf system itself, then there's basically two ways you can work through it. So one way is to work through each section in order, right? So what that would mean is, it goes stable fluid spine, power turn, lag, compression line, then straight line release, right? So the way you could work through that would be doing, and then there's 3 levels within each one, right? So the way you could do that would be do the stable fluid spine. You could do level 1, level 2, level 3, then go power turn, level 1, level 2, level 3, then lag, level 1, level 2, level 3, and so on. Or what you can do is you can do stable fluid spine level 1, then go to power turn level 1, then go to top speed lag level 1, then go to compression line level 1 and straight line release level 1, then go back and do stable fluid spine level 2. Now we have the test, right? So there's the test at the end of every section. If you don't feel like you've put in the reps to be proficient enough with it, then yeah, you need to put in more reps. So that way, when you move on to the next thing, because essentially the goal is to make it second nature, right? To where you don't have to think about it and you just do it. It's just something that's it's happening unconsciously, right? So you have to put in reps in order to be able to do that. So if you let's say you're working through the stable fluid spine and we say level 1 you got to do 1,000 reps, and you do the 1,000 reps and you still feel like, yeah, I don't feel like I quite have it yet. I don't feel like it's automatic. I don't feel like I'm, and you'll know if you move on and you work on something else and you see that you're not doing the level 1. Let's say you move on to level 2 and then you're looking at the yourself trying to do level 2 and you're not doing level 1, well, then you probably need to go back to level 1 and do more reps, right? To make that second nature. So that's kind of how I would work through it. And also when you're working through it, what I would say is look at your swing on video first, and then kind of look and kind of go through the system, go through like the first video of each piece of the system. So that way you at least kind of know what it is, right? And what you can do is you can look at your swing on video. And if you're already doing that, because most people are already doing several of the pieces of the system, they just need to work on other pieces. So a lot of people, the stable fluid spine's already in a good place. A lot of people already have a good power turn. A lot of people already have good lag, right? And for some people, you may need to work on every piece, but it's usually not everyone that needs to do that. So yeah, I would kind of look at your swing and then work through them in order. If your stable fluid spine's off in any of the levels, I would start there. If your power turn is off, I would start there. If you're casting, I would start in the lag course. If your stable fluid spine, what you don't want to do is, and this is what a lot of people do, I think this is a huge mistake that a lot of people make, is that because 80% of recreational golfers, or at least the club earlier than what we see the pros doing, they look at that and that's the first thing that they go to. And the problem with that is that if you're casting the club, if your spine angles are off, if you're not getting a good turn, if you're not doing all the previous pieces, you're going to have a really hard time getting the club to release out in front. It's going to be near impossible. So that's why you want to make sure that you're working through, look at your swing and go through them in that order. If you're already doing it, then you can skip it and you can go on to the next piece. but make sure that, most people aren't doing the straight line release. Now there might be a few people that are doing everything really well and they're just releasing the club early and then they need to go straight to that. But I would say that that's not that often that happens. All right, so WWCA says, with the driver, should I set up with the ball lined up with the toe in order to allow some arm extension and better center face contact on full swing? The driver, should I set up with the ball lined up with the toe? Generally, when I talk about ball position, I tend to like to talk about it with the upper body because everyone's stances can be a little bit different. There's maybe some golfers with narrower stances and wide stances. So I don't really like to talk about the ball position based on the stance so much, unless I'm talking about the middle of the stance, because no matter whether you have a wide stance or a narrow stance, that puts it in the same place, basically. So what I like to say with the driver is off of the lead shoulder is generally a good place to be, right? So if you imagine here, if I have this off my left shoulder, that's off my toe if I have a narrow stance. But if I have a wide stance, right, and there's my shoulder, right, well, that's not where the toe is. So so off of the lead shoulder is generally a good ball position for the driver. And that doesn't mean that you can't have it a little bit more back or a little bit more forward, but that's generally a good place to be. Elliot P sees, at what point does the left leg for right-handed golfer straighten on the downswing? Where are the hands in relation to a straight left leg post impact, during impact? So typically the lead leg, the left leg, is going to reach that maximum flex position at about lead arm parallel or a little bit later in the downswing, right? So it's going to be, that's typically where I'm going to reach the maximum flexed position. From there, it's going to start extending and it's going to start straightening out, right? So I'm here, I'm maxing out that flex. And then from here, it's going to start to gradually straighten out. Now, typically with most players, I would say the overwhelming majority of players at impact, there's still some flex in that lead leg. Now, it's not like this, but it's more like that. So you can see here, I still have some flex in my leg. If I straighten it out, it'd be like that. And even in the straight line release, there's typically a little bit of flex in that leg. It's not until usually after the straight line release, just after the straight line release, when I've looked at most players, that lead leg, it starts to fully straighten out, right? So again, here we are at the top. I'm going to max out that flex in my lead leg around in this area. Now, typically, it's not going to be flexing much more than it was at the top. So my lead leg is going to be flexed. It's about at the maximum flex here, to be honest. And then as we're coming down, we're essentially maintaining that flex in that lead leg. And then from here, it's going to start to gradually straighten out. At impact, I'm going to have a tiny amount of flex in my lead leg. And then as I come into the straight line release, it's straightening out even more. But usually, again, it's not fully straightened out until right after that straight line release. That's when we're going to see that fully straightened out lead leg with most players. Now, there are some players that do straighten it out earlier. One that would come to mind would be like a Brooks Koepka, right? So Brooks Koepka, he straightens out his lead leg. Usually it's pretty close to impact when that lead leg is straightened out. So there are definitely some outliers, but typically when you look at most players, that lead leg is not straightening out until basically just after that club is released. The reason is that if we fully straighten out the leg, then we don't have anything to power the hips continuing to rotate. What makes the hips continue to rotate or makes the body continue to rotate essentially is momentum. And your arms and the club head swinging around your body. That's what's bringing everything around it into a full finish. If I get here, let's say that I straighten out my leg right here, right, and I'm not even close to impact. Well, I don't have anything to keep my hips moving, right? So what's going to happen from here is I'm going to kind of flip my hands, right, and then my hips may keep rotating after that, but it's only because my hands and my club have gone past my body, and the momentum of that is bringing me or is keeping my hips rotating around. So that's typically, what you're going to see. So you want to release that club with the legs, get that club releasing with the legs. It doesn't really fully straighten out typically until right at that release or a little bit after. So let's keep going. So Ronald says, how do you stay focused when there is a long wait before you can take your next shot? Well, what I'd recommend doing is just kind of you don't really need to stay focused, to be honest. When it's time to hit the shot, then you can re-engage. So you don't actually need to stay focused. Typically what I do is I'll be chit-chatting. I'll be, if it's on the tee box, I might be playing a game on the tee box. Where I might be bouncing the club, bouncing the ball on my club or something like that. So you don't need to stay focused. Re-engage when it's time to hit the shot. That's what I'd recommend doing. Carolyn M says, marks on the face of my clubs indicate I'm striking the ball about 1/4 of an inch behind the sweet spot. I have tried lining up the toe, but still often hit near the face heel. Could my strong and then it cut off. Yeah, so you just have a tendency to hit the ball on the heel is what it sounds like. Now, lining up on the toe, that might work temporarily, but that typically is not something that's going to work in the long term. And that's because we're human. We're going to adapt, right? If we were robots where you just kind of pushed a button and then we just swung the same way every single time, then that would work fine, right? But unfortunately, we're human and we adapt, and you're going to tend to kind of go back to what you did before. So essentially what you need to do is you need to recalibrate. So you recalibrate by intentionally hitting the ball off the toe. So instead of lining up on the toe, line up on the center of the face and then change your intention to hitting the ball out on the toe. And what will likely happen is your strike will move more toward the center of the face. Now, you just keep doing that until you actually start hitting the ball on the toe consistently. You adapt, right? And then that's when you go back to trying to hit the ball in the center of the face. And what you can do beyond that to make sure that you never get away from where neutral is from the center of the face, I would do strike training. So strike training would consist of hitting not draws, hitting it off the toe, hitting it off the heel, hitting it off the center. So alternating between those shots. So if I'm at the range, I'm going to put some foot power spray on my club face or something like that. So that way I can see where the strikes are. And I'm going to line up the ball in the center of the face on all of these. And I'm going to try to intentionally hit the ball off the toe. And I'm going to keep going until I'm successful. And then once I'm successful, then I'm going to switch to hitting the ball off the heel, right? Once I get a successful one off the heel, then I'm going to go back to hitting it in the center of the face, right? And I'm just going to count the total number of reps that it took me to get those 3 strikes. And then I'm just going to try to beat that score over and over and over. So that's what I would recommend doing because, that's going to help you to have a better awareness of the center of the face. So Ronald says, sometimes I do not fully straighten my lead leg. I think this is to protect my knee. So is this a big problem? Arnold Palmer used to finish with a bent, I think it means front knee sometimes. Yes, it's not the most powerful way to swing the club. It could be to protect your knee. It could be that you're intentionally doing that to stall your body so that way you can release the club face earlier. Because that's essentially kind of what it does. There are definitely players that kind of keep the leg bent as they're coming through. You can only do what you're physically capable of doing. So, I wouldn't say it's a big problem, right? So the way you want to look at things is you want to look at what are my ball flight contact issues, and then what am I doing in my swing that are causing those ball flight contact issues. You don't want to look at it like, oh, well, my leg isn't straightening out. how do I fix that? Because you don't know if that's actually causing an issue or not, right? So everything that you do, anything that you change in your swing, changing your swing is hard. It's a very difficult thing to do. So um, you don't want to waste your time working on things that just don't matter, right? Because you may spend a ton of time working on getting your leg to straighten out, and it may make zero difference, or actually may make things worse. So, uh, you know, you could definitely hit good shots with a bent lead leg. When we look at the best players in the world, most of them aren't doing that, but um, you can definitely hit good shots. As you mentioned, Arnold Palmer did. Ryan Palmer is another one. He kind of keeps his leg bent coming through. So WWCA says, I meant, should I line up the ball with the toe of driver to allow center face contact? My bad. Sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you meant lining up on your lead toe. You can do that, but that's as I mentioned before. It's not, if you're hitting the ball in the heel of the club and then you line it up on the toe. Again, that may give you temporary improvement, but eventually you're going to adapt and go back to hitting the ball in the heel. And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes your mind, like senses, okay, I'm farther away from the golf ball. I need to reach more to get to the golf ball, right? And then the heel strike is worse. So that's I don't really like doing that. What I would say is change your intention, right? And if you're hitting the ball off the heel, change your intention to hitting the ball off the toe, and you'll hit the ball more in the center of the face. Saran says, how should the driver look at address? Is it with the toe up? If so, would this work for someone who hovers the club? Yeah, the drivers are more upright clubs. So the toe is going to be up a little bit, and it works fine if you hover the club as well. WWCA says, your answer to Carol helped also. Awesome. Ronald says, how many reps to embed a new swing change? Right now, I'm trying to get last parallel and then releasing the club. It really just depends on what it is, and it depends on how well you're practicing it. If you're practicing it correctly, there's a lot of factors that go into it. Depends on how comfortable you are with it already. But basically, there's no set number of reps. We tell you to do 1,000, 3,000 because that's probably around what would be needed, but it's not always the case, right? So basically what it comes down to is you don't need to do any more reps once it becomes second nature. Once you don't have to think about it to make it happen. That's because you have to work through the stages of learning. There's 4 stages of learning. The first stage is unconscious incompetence. This is where you're not aware of any kind of issue at all, right? So in your case, you're talking about get the last parallel, then releasing the club. So you're not even aware of how the club should work from last parallel to the ball, right? You're oblivious to it, all right? So then you move into the second stage, which is conscious incompetence. So now you are aware. You've looked at some tour players and you see, oh wow, all these tour players release the club. They're at last parallel, then they release the club in this certain way, and that's not what I'm doing. But you don't really know how to do it yet. You're not able to do it, right? Then you move into the third stage, which is called conscious competence, where now you're able to get it to look like a tour player, but you have to be conscious of it in order to do it. The moment you think about something else, right? This is where you're putting in the reps. The moment you think about something else is when you stop doing it, right? And then you move into the last stage, which is called unconscious competence, where you're doing it and you don't even have to think about it. If you were to do something else, you would have to think about it, right? So that's essentially what you have to work through. So you can test this by working on something, right? Let's say you put in 1,000 reps with something, then you go and you work on something else, and if you see that you're doing it naturally, subconsciously, then you're good to go. But if you see that you're not, then you need to put in more reps. So Ronald says, I did try to strap my lead leg for more power, but it led to knee pain. Yeah, so I probably avoid that then. Ronald goes on to say, basically, I am aware of last parallel in releasing. However, I do it, then I then forgot. Yeah, so you just need to get more reps in until it becomes second nature. You haven't moved into that last stage of that last stage of learning. You're still in that third stage. All right, we got almost 20 minutes left here. If you got some more questions, go ahead and post them. Ron says, would the rest be hitting balls or just movement to ingrain the swing? I mean, the end goal would be to do it hitting balls, right? So, you need to get to where it's second nature hitting a ball. Like that's the end goal. It doesn't do you very much good, right? To ingrain a movement in a practice swing, but you can only do it in a practice swing, but not in a ball, right? So, not with the ball. So you'd want to make it second nature with the ball. Elliot P says, what type of release does the Toss system promote? Toss system doesn't promote any particular type of release. When we're talking about the release, we're just talking about where the club is split in the arms, right? So basically where you've released all of your lag, right? I assume you're talking about a rolled versus a square. You can have either one with the Toss system. All we're talking about is where the club, that's what the straight line release is where the club is splitting the forearms. Any release that you have, any type or any type of release that you have within that is 100% fine. It's about where the club is splitting the forearm. So this would be not release, not release, not release, not release, still not release, and then right there, that's where it's released. So if you have more of a square release where you don't really roll the arms over, or you have more of a rolled release where you kind of roll the arms over more, that either one of those is 100% fine. We don't promote one or the other. It's really just about where the club is releasing that we're talking about. So Ronald says, so what about an amount of air swings and then hit some balls? Is that a good idea? So basically, what I would call a practice swing or an air swing, what I would call that is a regression, right? So if you can do it with balls, right, then you don't need to do any air swings, right? Unless you can do air swings if you're in a situation where you just can't hit balls. That can help you to, it's better than doing nothing for sure. But if you can do it hitting balls, then you need to do a lot of reps doing balls. Where you would do air swings or practice swings would be where you can't do it with a ball. So you're regressing it to a practice swing to where you're actually able to do it. And then the goal is to move up to a ball. But once you're able to do it with the ball, then you try to do as many reps as you can with a ball. So that way you can ingrain, because that's the goal. The goal is to be able to do it in a full speed swing, full length swing, and with a ball, right? That's the goal. And to get to where you can do it on the course in the highest competition, right? That's the end goal that you have to get to. So, if you can do it in practice, if you can do it with the ball, and you have the ability, like you're in a situation where you can do reps where you're doing it with a ball, then it doesn't really make any sense to do any practice swings because it's going to be better to do it with the ball. But if you're in a situation where maybe you're at home and all you can do is with the ball, but what I would say with that is I would maybe invest in some foam balls and hit some foam balls, or even like a wadded up piece of paper. That was my practice when I was younger. Is I took notebook paper when I was a kid, and I wadded it up in a ball, and I just hit those. I had an old rug that I got from the dollar store, and I put the rug down. That was my hitting mat, and I would just hit off of that, and I would wear out a spot on the hitting mat, and then I would just start hitting on a different spot. So I had this raggedy rug that I would hit, so I wouldn't damage our carpet or anything, and I would just hit off of that all the time. So there are definitely ways that you can still, do it, hit balls, even though you're not necessarily hitting real golf balls. So Derek S says, "Hello Q, I am a high handicapper and not a long ball hitter. What is the best way to manage the average 7,200 yard course?" I wouldn't recommend playing 7,200 yards, and I wouldn't say that that's average. That's pretty high. Though I mean, most golf courses aren't even that long from the longest tees, in my experience, anyway. Um, so I would not play 7,200 yards if you're a high handicapper. I'd probably play more around 6,000 yards. Um, Most golf courses are going to have tees that are going to be, somewhere in the 6,000 to 6,300 area. That's what I would recommend playing. Um, if you're a high handicapper, and especially if you're not a long ball hitter. If you're not, if you don't hit, if you don't hit it somewhat straight and long, 7,200 yards is just not going to be any fun at all. So, um, so yeah, I would definitely recommend playing. Probably around 6,000 yards would be a better, uh, a better fit for you. So Ron says, "Do you think that slow motion air swings are they useful for embedding a new movement? I actually have a net so I can hit balls, but I do not know the ball flight." Yes, they are useful for embedding a new movement. But as I mentioned, you do them so that way. So the key to making a change is to regress things to where you can do them, right? And a lot of times that's going to involve uh, it's going to involve a slow motion air swing, right? So let's say that you're someone who is coming over the top, right? And your right elbow is just wants to do this. Every time you take a full speed swing with a golf ball, it's always that right elbow coming over the top. That's the issue. So okay, I need to get my right elbow more underneath, right? So that way I can swing that club more from the inside. But you can't do it fast right now, and you cannot do it with a golf ball. So what may be necessary for that person is to do slow motion air swings where they're doing it. So literally doing swings where I'm kind of going like this, right? And just putting in reps, getting comfortable with that. And the goal would be to go faster, right? So once I get to where I'm doing that, now I'm gonna try to get to where I do a little bit faster. If I go faster and it breaks down, then I'm gonna go slower again, get it right. Then I'm gonna try to go faster again. So what you wouldn't want to do is just do a bunch of these swings forever and ever and ever and ever, because you're never progressing. You're never progressing to a full swing. So the whole goal is to get to where you can do it in a full speed, full length swing, right? And you go ahead and if there's an issue in your swing, go ahead and try it at full speed, full length swing, and then just keep regressing it until you can do it. If you can't do it full speed, full length, then regress it. Go slower, right? Remove the golf ball. Go slower. Basically, go as slow as you have to go to be able to do it, and then progress from there. So you don't want to stay going really, really slow all the time, because that's not progressing it. So it doesn't work to where, okay, I'm going to do a really slow swing. I'm doing it in my really slow swing, and now I'm going to roll over a golf ball and do it at full speed. If you do that, you're more than likely going to just do the same thing that you did before, right? When you're going at full speed, you have to progress it to full speed. So I would think about it like weightlifting. This is an analogy that I use with a lot of students. If I'm a weightlifter and I want to lift a certain amount of weight, let's say I'm doing bench press, and right now I can only bench press 200 pounds, but I want to get to where I can bench press 300 pounds. Well, if I want to bench press 300 pounds, it doesn't do me any good to try to lift 300 pounds every day, right? It also wouldn't do me any good to just lift 200 pounds a bunch and then expect to be able to do 300 pounds. What I have to do is get to where I'm stronger with 200 pounds. Then I go to 210. Then I get to where I'm stronger with 210. Then I go to 220. Then I get to where I'm strong. And you get the idea. And eventually I'm going to get to 300, right? But you have to regress it to where you can do it, then progress it to where you want to go from there. That's basically the process of making a change to your swing. So I think slow motion swings are often necessary for people to do in order to get as a regressed way to get a movement down. It's not always necessary. Some people can just, if someone's coming over the top, you can tell them like, okay, now I want you to swing toward, someone's doing this, and you say, I want you to swing toward first base. On the very next swing, they may swing toward first base, but they may also still do the same thing they already had. So you may be like, okay, well now I'm going to put an obstacle down the ground. I'm going to do everything I can to get that person to do the movement as fast as they can and with a ball. But a lot of times with certain things, you do have to break it down and do it in a super slow swing to get it down. Because especially if you've been playing golf for a really long time, you've been playing golf for a long time, and you have these ingrained motor patterns, changing those things are difficult, right? It's 100 times easier to teach a kid who's, let's say, a 12-year-old kid who just started playing golf, because that kid is like a piece of clay. You can just mold them and make them do whatever you want. If they're coming over the top and you tell them, hey, swing toward first base, most of the time they'll do it without much thought. But you take a 65-year-old guy who's been coming over the top his entire life, and you just tell him swing toward first base, most likely not going to happen, because this movement, they've done it so many times over and over and over and over, right? And they will have a hard time changing it, right? So in that situation, I'll try to put down the obstacle. I'll try to do everything I can. Earlier somebody was talking about coming over the top, and they put the box in the way, and they just crush the box every time, right? That person, right? I can't remember if that was you, Ronald, or somebody else, but that person is going to probably need to go very slow, right? That person, I would tell that person, okay, I want you to take like a 50% speed, a full swing, but at 50% speed, right? So that might look something like this, right? Where it's just half the speed that they normally would. The ball, if you were to hit the ball, it would go half the distance than it normally would. And if they couldn't do it there, I'd tell them to go even slower. If they could do it, I'd say, okay, let's get a couple in a row where we're able to do that. Then let's try to go a little bit faster. So that's basically the key to getting better, is to regress to where you can do it and then progress it from there. So I know a lot of you are probably working on things in your swing, and you may be getting frustrated because you're not able to do them. Well, the reason is that you haven't regressed it to where you can do it. If you never, ever regress it to where you can do it, then you can never progress to where you can do it. You're just going to continue to get really frustrated because you're not doing it over and over and over and over again. All right, let's keep going here. So Ron says, I've been criticized for hitting too many balls and train the movement without worrying where the ball goes, hence the air swing thing. Yeah, so I mean, eventually, so basically what you want to get them when you're training a movement, the most important thing, if you're trying to get a movement to happen, is to get the movement first. Once you get the movement down, then you want to look at the ball flight. So you want to pay attention to what's going on. It's not that you don't care. You certainly care. You want to pay attention to it, but it's not the goal of what you're trying to do. So like I said, if you're someone who's, working on the elbow thing that I was talking about, and then you hit a bunch of shots off the heel or off the hosel area of the club. Well, then what I would do is I would think, okay, well, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to try to feel it off the toe. I'm going to try to hit the ball off the toe if I'm hitting the ball. So I'm going to do my elbow thing, then I'm going to try to hit the ball off the toe. So it's not that it's not the end goal of what you're trying to do. All right, so I got time for a couple more here. So Elliot P says, how much does swing weight impact your tempo? I used to carry a driver with a heavier D8 swing weight, but was most recently fit for a driver that measured C9 due to shorter shaft length from standard stock. The club feels much lighter, and my swing speed has increased marginally, but has made me more conscious and aware of having the same tempo for consistent drives. That's a good question. To be honest with you, I really don't know. I'm not a club fitter, so I don't really know the effects of, the swing weights. That would probably be a better question for, someone who's a really good club fitter. So yeah, to be honest with you, I'm not really sure. I could see how it could make a difference, right? If I take this club and then I take this alignment stick, right, and I swing it, I'm probably not going to swing them in about the same way, right? Because I'm going to feel, this is lighter, this is heavier. I know that's not what you mean by swing weight, more the balance of the club. But, I'm going to swing. So a better example might be if I have a sledgehammer and I have this, right? I'm going to swing that sledgehammer in a different way than I swing this. So I would think that it can certainly make a difference. How much? I'm not really sure, but I could imagine it can certainly make a difference. So Derek S says, how would you help someone to rotate properly around the axis lower the lead shoulder? They do it properly in drills, but once you put the club in their hands, things change. Well, I would need to see the swing to know exactly why, because most people who don't rotate properly in the downswing is they're reacting to the position of the club or the club face. So what I mean by that is if the club is steep like this, right? And if I were to rotate really well with that club like this, I'm just going to come down even steeper. So what a lot of people will do is they'll get that club steep and then they'll stand up out of it, not rotate. So that way that club can shallow out. Also, if the club face is open, if this club face is really open, then what I might do is I might stand up out of it so that way I can release it. So if you stand up and really extend, you're basically using all the rotation that you have early in the swing, right? We want to start the rotation in the downswing by flexing, and then we want to finish the rotation by extending. If we start the rotation by extending, then we don't have anything left to keep rotating, right? So if I need to early release this club to square it up, meaning I need to extend my body away from the ball early, so that way I can release the club to square it up. Because keep in mind, if we have more lag on the club, that opens up the club face. If I release the club, it closes the face. So if I have the face open, then I can release it earlier to close it, right? And then that can lead to, that can lead to the issues, right? So that's more than likely what's going on is you're probably coming down steep and or the club face is open, leading to those, not being able to rotate properly. All right, last question here from Ronald says, I'm trying to put together a training routine at home. Now the weather is better in the UK and was thinking of an hour a day. So wanted to get routine to include reps and how many. So really, if you go to the Top Speed Golf system, it's all spelled out for you there. So just working through that is what you need to do. It's got all the reps on there. You can do 100 reps a day. You could do 50 reps a day, but everything you need right there as far as a routine and what to go through and the reps you need to do, it's all spelled out there. We tell you to do 1,000 reps or 3,000 reps or whatever. Ideally, what I would say is I don't like to hear people doing like 300 reps a day because, to be honest with you, most of those reps are probably not good reps. I would rather hear somebody do more frequent sessions with smaller amount of reps and then the quality of those reps are much higher, right? Because when I see people practice a lot of times and they're doing reps, right? It's just one after. There's no really conscious thought about what's going on. So I want you to make sure that you're thinking through it, because that way, that's one reason why there's no set number of reps, because if you're not doing quality reps, then your reps don't count as much as somebody else who's doing really quality reps, who's really working through it and thinking about it and stuff like that. So anyway, we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. We'll be back here tomorrow, Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you next time.